Hey everybody, what's up and welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, and today we're going to be talking about the actress Margaret Lawrence. This is an oldie but a goodie. Sorry, I have to move my camera. It's a little, I don't like the way that it's looking right now. But yeah, if you're new here, I'm Liz. I talk about true crime, and I like to cover things true crime. So, with that being said, let's get into today's true crime case. So, Margaret Lawrence, she was very successful in her stage roles when she was younger, but unfortunately her life would kind of take a turn for the worst. So, Margaret grew up in Germantown, Pennsylvania, and she was very known for how successful she became as an actress in her late teens, and due to her succession in stage roles. So she was very well known on Broadway. Well, she also took advantage of her good looks. She was a very beautiful woman. And she had a knack for comedy, so she was kind of like an all-around kind of person, which was great for her. Now, in 1910, she stopped her career because she married a patent lawyer, of whom was much older than her, and they also had 2 daughters. But Margaret grew very bored of being a mom and being a young housewife, so she ended up divorcing her husband and returned to the stage. It wouldn't be long after this when she would meet her second husband, Wallace Edinger, who was also well known as an actor and often was her co-star. So somebody she already knew. Wallace Edinger, who was also well known as an actor and often was her co-star. So somebody she already knew. But her looks and acts weren't the only thing she was known for. She was also known for her very heavy drinking, and she would turn to the bottle even more after Wallace Edinger had died from pneumonia. So here she is, a young divorced mom of 2 girls. Her second husband dies, and she has a failing career, and she's an alcoholic. So she already has kind of a shit end of a stick for everything. Well, months before Margaret died, she went to court against Wallace Edinger's mom over his estate, and his mother accused Margaret of being a drunk, specifically in front of her children. Now, this was taken by the media, it was thrown out, and her reputation was kind of destroyed after this. And it wouldn't be long after this court case in particular that the roles she was used to having come in weren't, and her persistent relationship with alcohol would just get in the way of everything. She also became heavily involved with another actor at the time, and this would be her ultimate downfall. So she became involved with a man named Louis Bennison. Now, Louis Bennison, his career as well took a turn for the worst, and he was known for being insanely jealous and would never let Margaret out of his vision. He was also known to carry a revolver with him. This is a very big ding dong. Keep that thought in the back of your head because you're going to need it a little bit later. So on a hot afternoon on June 9th of 1929, the tenants of a 10-story apartment house heard a frenetic female shriek coming out of the penthouse. But they simply just kind of shrugged it off because they knew who lived in this penthouse. The most famous resident of this penthouse was Margaret Lawrence and her boyfriend Louis Bennison. They often heard their whiskey-fueled antics, so they didn't really think of it. And a lot of people just weren't concerned when there was noise that close of the party, especially because Margaret Lawrence and her boyfriend really knew how to party, so they didn't the noise didn't bother them. They were used to it at this point. Soon we would find out that it would get way worse than anyone ever imagined, as a midday drinking bender getting out of hand. The screams, in fact, belonged to Mrs. Gertrude Schiller, of whom was a friend of Margaret Lawrence. See, Margaret, obviously, we talked about, she was a Broadway actress, and she lived on the top floor for about a year and was known to party and was really well known to enjoy her nightlife. Now, Gertrude had been really anxious all day, and she didn't know why. And it was no secret to anybody or to any of Margaret's friends that she she really liked her partying ways. Now, oftentimes it was too much on a daily basis. Now, at about 2 p.m. on June 9th, Margaret failed to answer her phone, and Gertrude could not get over that feeling that something happened to Margaret. Just couldn't, like gut feeling about something that's going to happen, and you just like that impending doom that you kind of build up to. That's what she was feeling. Gertrude was trying to help her friend by using her pass key to Margaret's penthouse, and she let herself in. Well, she would kind of like mosey around the apartment, and she found Margaret in bed. And after she found Margaret in bed, she was quick to think that, oh, she was just asleep. She was wearing her silk camise, and she was laying on her back in what appeared to be such a peaceful sleep. That was until Gertrude noticed that when she tried to shake Margaret, she wouldn't wake. That was until she noticed a small dark circle that was directly over Margaret's heart. Margaret was in fact dead. Then she would see the large pool of a red stain that was on the sheet that Margaret was on. And after she started to slowly walk away, she then screamed. This is the scream that the neighbors heard, the scream that nobody thought of. She ran out of the apartment, and Gertrude was in shock of what she saw. The horror of seeing her friend murdered. She was terrified. When the police arrived, they proceeded to open the curtains of the apartment. And lo and behold, what do they find? What they see is the remnants of the night prior. Well frozen in a very peculiar position was another body. This was a man on his knees as if he was in the act of praying, but his head was against the side of the bed. He as well had been shot in the heart. Next to this body was a 6-shooter revolver similar to the ones seen in Western movies. And in the cylinder, there was 2 cartridges empty. So this is our murder weapon. There was 2 empty cartridges, 2 bullet wounds, 2 GSWs on these 2 bodies. Now, at first, there was a lot of speculations as to what happened with these murders, whether it was murder-suicide. Some say Margaret was shot first and then Benison turned the gun on himself. But there was still a question of why a glamorous celebrity couple could die from such a tragic ending. Eventually it came out that Margaret and Louis had faded from stardom that made them, and they were just like, they were stuck in their troubled and tortured lives. It wasn't that big of a surprise when they showed up dead, apparently, to anybody during this time. And apparently Gertrude, the one that found them, told police a few weeks prior to the shooting that Louis threatened to shoot Margaret because she threatened to leave him, and he then brandished the gun in front of her face and said, "If you do, I'll kill you. This will count for both of us." This is what Louis said. After this whole scene happened, Margaret gave Gertrude a pass key to her apartment. That way she could look in on her every once in a while. That's also the pass key that she used to get in. No one actually knows what prompted Louis to carry out such a threat, and the newspapers then wasted no time in writing about the actors' lives and their deaths. Margaret Lawrence was a pitiful victim of her own weakness, and Louis died due to his own cheap ego. Eventually, it was determined that this was a murder-suicide, that Louis shot Margaret above the heart, and then he turned the gun on himself. So that, my friends, is the tragic death of Margaret Lawrence at the hands of her boyfriend, Louis Benison. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in another video.